Welcome environmental systems students to the Dallas Independent School District STEM Environmental Education Center. We know you can't be here in person this morning, but we are going to do our best to make you feel like you're here. And we'd like to give a special welcome to the Dallas Environmental Science Academy. They are with us this morning. Thank you so much for registering for this field trip. And I even saw we already have one question submitted, so we'll get to that here in a minute. If you are watching this and you are not already registered for this field trip, you can still do that by going to www.tiny.cc/EEC register to get yourself or your class registered for this morning's field trip. And this morning we are going to focus on biotic and abiotic factors in environmental systems. So during this virtual field trip, students will explore the relationships of biotic and abiotic factors within habitats, ecosystems, and biomes. So you're going to see us do a quick introduction to vocabulary related to biotic and abiotic factors. We're going to compare some biomes, explore Texas natives, and use some dichotomous keys. Now, while we're doing all of that, you can ask us questions like somebody already has, and you do that by going to this website, which is www.tiny.cc/EEC-question-answer. You'll fill out a very short form to send us in your question, and then we will do our best to answer it. And you can ask us as many questions as you like, and we will do our best to answer all of them in the time that we have this morning. So without further ado, let's get started on the intro to vocabulary with Ms. Ramirez.
Hello, my name is Ms. Ramirez, and in this segment, we're going to be kind of going over an overview of some of the vocabulary words so that you're familiar with them while the other teachers are giving their presentations. So I'm going to give you guys an overview of what a habitat, ecosystem, and a biome is. So just to review, if I were to ask you to rank those in order from the smallest geographical biotic unit to the largest geographical biotic unit, how would you arrange those? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to start off with the smallest geographical biotic unit, and that is a habitat. So y'all should probably already be familiar with this word. A habitat is simply the place where an organism lives. A good habitat has food, water, shelter, and space. A habitat can be something small, like a single tree, or it can be something large, like the postal forest that we have across the street. So think of a habitat as just an animal's address. Where does it live? So we're going to be looking at the habitat of a red worm, and I also found some other cool things today. With all this lovely rain, there's lots of organisms that are crawling around. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to switch our camera, and I'm going to show you the habitat of some of the things that I found today. So just bear with me while we make the switch. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is our red worms, and I'm going to pick some of them up for you guys. These red worms are excellent decomposers, and their habitat would be areas like this nice moist soil that we have. I found quite a few of them yesterday underneath this rock, so we have nice moist soil. I also see that I didn't notice before. Can you guys make out these organisms? We have some snails with all this lovely wet weather. We're starting to see more of them coming out. So under this rock, this could be a good habitat for our red worms. It is also a good habitat for these snails that you see here. Now, a habitat is simply the place where an animal lives. When we talk about the interactions between the species and the living and non-living aspects, then we start talking about an ecosystem. So let's look at this infographic. An ecosystem is the interaction of living and non-living things in a particular environment. And a biome can consist of many different ecosystems. So the ecosystem that we have here would be like a schoolyard garden ecosystem. We have a variety of different plants and animals. And also we have non-living factors that are taking into consideration how these organisms survive. Now, the scientific word for living things is biotic. So bio means life. So things that are biotic are living things. Now, even though a living thing has died, it is still considered part of the biotic element. So all living things, plants, animals, decomposers, all living things are biotic. Then we have something called abiotic. That's just the scientific word for non-living. So A means without, bio again is life. So abiotic means without life. Can you guys name some abiotic factors that you can see in this environment here? So the first abiotic factor that I see in this environment is this nice little puddle of water. We also have other abiotic factors that we can study. Temperature is a good abiotic factor, and we can study that using a thermometer. We also have a rain gauge for precipitation and a soil thermometer for the temperature of soil. So water, temperature, the amount of sunlight, wind conditions, the pH of the soil, those are all examples of abiotic factors, as well as rocks. So those are all abiotic. Even though things are abiotic, they're not alive, they still impact the survival of our living things. So far we said a habitat is just an animal's home. An ecosystem is all the living and non-living interactions. And then we have a bigger part called a biome. And let's look at the infographic for a biome. A biome is just a very large area of the planet which is classified by the plants and animals that live in it. So it has very distinct climates. Temperature, soil, and the amount of light and water determine what life exists in a biome. So I'm going to show you an infographic for a biome. This is a document from NASA, and these are the biomes that they classify them as. Now, it's important to note that these are not the only biomes. Depending upon what resource you use, some scientists have many biomes, and then some scientists have as few as 5 biomes. So it kind of depends on how you're classifying them. But for today, we're going to be using the NASA biomes. So if we look at this infographic, what biome do you think we live in? And also think about what are some observations you notice about the location of some of these biomes. So I noticed that we live in the grassland biome. So here is North America where we are. And we're in this yellow section here. So we're in the grassland biome. In fact, we are part of the Blackland Prairie ecoregion of Texas. Also, if we take a look at our observation, you'll notice that our biomes span different countries and also different continents. But one thing remains the same. Your biomes will cover the same latitudes. So for example, let's look at the rainforest biome. The rainforest biome are these dark green areas. What do you notice about the location of the rainforest biomes? They are all along the equator. Also take a look at some of our cold biomes like the tundra. What do you notice about them? They're all in areas that are around the poles. So biomes have very similar climates and they have similar latitudes as well. So if you were to put all of these together into a diagram, this is what the hierarchy would look like. You have the smallest unit, which is a habitat. The habitat is just where a specific species lives. Then you have the ecosystem. The ecosystem consists of many habitats, and it also tells us about the interaction between the biotic and abiotic elements within that ecosystem. Then you have biomes. Biomes consist of many different ecosystems, but they all have similar climates and latitudes. And then the biggest one of all is the biosphere. And the biosphere is simply all of the biomes put together, and we typically refer to that as planet Earth. So that is the hierarchy of organization within the Earth. So I have a reflection question for you guys, and it's a challenge. I want to see if you can identify an organism, draw and describe its habitat, ecosystem, and biome, and then describe how does it interact with other biotic elements and with other abiotic elements. And then before you go, I just wanted to show you a close-up. There are some more snails that we found earlier. Some of them are starting to move. And then we have another example of biotic elements with this little infographic here. So biotic things are things like your plants, also known as autotrophs or producers. You also have consumers, which are your animals. They're also known as heterotrophs. And then you also have your decomposers, which help to break down the dead animal and plant material. So all of these consist of your biotic elements. And then you have your abiotic elements like the sun, the water, and temperature that interact together. And that is all I have for you guys today. We're going to pass it back to Mr. Broughton, and he's going to answer any questions that y'all might have.
Thank you, Mr. Ramirez. We do have a number of questions. The first one comes from Ryan, and do we have animals? Yes, we do. You already saw some of the snails and worms that we have here, but we are going to show you some other animals during this field trip, so I don't want to ruin that surprise. And we even have more animals besides the ones we're going to show you today. Hopefully we can show the rest of them to you in an upcoming field trip. We just don't have time to show everything this morning. And then Simon has a comment. He's just glad to be here. We're glad to have you. Marion, what is the biggest form of ecosystem? Well, like Mr. Ramirez explained, different ecosystems make up a biome, and then all the biomes make up the biosphere, which is the earth. And Omar has a question. What happens when snakes die? What happens to their body? If a snake dies, usually one of two things will happen to it. An animal might eat its body if it's laying out, and if no animal finds it, it will decompose. So worms and fungi and bacteria will break its body down and put it back into the soil. And then Maria has a question. Why do snakes change skin? Snakes shed their skin, and other reptiles shed their skin. It's just a way of growing and staying clean. We don't shed our skin, but we do lose skin cells every day. So even though it's not exactly like a snake, we both lose skin cells regularly. Okay, we are going to go on now to Mr. Monroe, who's going to help us compare biomes, I think using some animals too.
Good morning, students. My name is Mr. Monroe, and I'm going to be covering a little bit about different biomes and the animal organisms that might inhabit those biomes. But before I go forward with this, I'm going to kind of reinforce what Ms. Ramirez has stated to you all. You know, the earth is covered with many different types of ecosystems. And of course, ecologists divide these into biome areas that are distinctive, like Ms. Ramirez says, especially using climate as a consideration, and the type of organisms that live in those particular ecosystems and biomes. It could be a plant or a type of plant, or it could be a type of animal. Now, I am going to show you a few animals today that come from different biomes and how they compare as far as their diet and the type of habitat that they need. The first one that I'm going to start with actually comes from a biome that we refer to as the rainforest. Now, in the rainforest, when something dies, and I heard that there were questions about when a snake dies or what happens to the body, you know, there's a group of organisms that act as decomposers, right? Well, in the rainforest, there's lots of plant life. We know that, right? Well, in the rainforest, there are organisms that love to clean up dead plant life. One such organism is referred to as a millipede. I do have a tropical millipede for you to observe. This gigantic millipede is a tropical millipede, very large, and we know that this is a tropical millipede that hangs out in the rainforest, places where the vegetation is so thick that when some of that vegetation dies, it's got plenty to eat. You see the size of this one. Now, this is a millipede that would be found in a deciduous area, a forest, a deciduous forest. You can see that it is a little more smaller, a great deal smaller. And it loves to eat dead leaves from deciduous trees, okay? That's its primary diet. So there is a difference in the size, right? Well, guess what? There's another type of decomposer that actually comes from our post oak preserve. It's one of my favorite decomposers because it's considered to be one of the mightiest insects known to man. In fact, this is a beetle called a best bug, a Betsy bug, a patent leather beetle. And probably because it's a patent leather beetle, I get that name, is simply because it is black and shiny. These little guys are so strong that they can move over 20 times their own body mass, okay? And guess what? They don't eat the leaves of a tree. They actually consume the wood or dead wood from a tree. And there's one particular tree, kind of tree, that they love to eat, and that is oak. Now, you wouldn't find an oak tree, not too much, in the rainforest. But what you will find, where you will find an oak tree, is in a deciduous forest, okay? So there's a distinct difference because of the plant life that these guys need to consume. They would not probably thrive in the rainforest. Now, moving from talking about the rainforest and the tropical forest, I'm going to talk about the desert just a little bit. You know, there are creatures that live in the desert, and they have to live in a way that certain conditions exist there. They've got to tunnel or dig. And I've got a tortoise that I'd like to introduce to you guys, and this is a cicada tortoise. You find these tortoises originally are found in the continent of Africa, in the deserts. It's called a cicada tortoise. And one of the things that they will do, they will tunnel, they will dig down to protect themselves, either to keep themselves warm if the desert gets cold or night, or simply to stay cool during the day by digging down. The type of vegetation that they love, they will even eat cactus. So again, it goes back to what type of plant life and conditions exist in a particular area, or the climate that exists there, that allows this organism to thrive in that particular biome. Let me get Michelangelo out, and we'll talk a little bit about him. Like I said, Michelangelo is a cicada tortoise. Now, I estimate that Michelangelo is somewhere, he's about 20 years old. And these tortoises, actually this species of tortoises, this tortoise is among the largest tortoises that we can find in the world today. And they are found in the continent of Africa. He can live to be well over 100 years old and weigh as much or more than 100 pounds. Michelangelo has a way to go, doesn't he? Another name for this tortoise, they're often called the African spurred tortoise. He's kind of curious, isn't he? Yeah. And probably how they get their name, the horn spurred tortoise, is because of the spurs that we see on his legs. Do you think that might be an adaptation that might help him survive in his particular ecosystem or biome? I do believe so. Remember when I said they like to tunnel or dig? I think that helps them dig. Looks like Michelangelo's been digging with his claws and using those spurs. And you know, a lot of people consider getting one of these for a pet. But one thing you must think about when you get one is their longevity. Yeah, they live for a very long time, 70 or more years, 100 years, and can weigh as much as, well over 100 pounds. So what that means is they consume a lot of food, okay? Now, we got Michelangelo about 10 years ago, and when he came to us, he was not this big. The people that brought him in, they were looking for a home for him simply because they found him in their backyard. And they had other pets, and they just couldn't afford the food bill for this guy. So I guess doing what we do out here with our gardens and stuff, and various people bringing him something to eat, he is really a happy camper. And they make a pretty good pet when you do that for them. Keep them healthy, and they make a pretty good companion. Now remember, in the desert, here's another little turtle. Not another little turtle, but this is a little turtle. And this little guy comes from a deciduous forest, or our post-oak preserve, which actually is a savanna. And very common box turtle, except this species of the box turtle can be found right here. This is called a three-toed box turtle. Michelangelo, he's a herbivore. This turtle, the box turtle, it's a herbivore. It loves to eat plant life, especially green stuff, okay? Now, probably it gets its name because the back feet have 3 toes on each foot. Three-toed box turtle. And you know, we're not seeing very many of these over in the post oak anymore. The other day we saw one, and I really got excited because I hadn't seen one in a long time. When I first started teaching out here, we used to see these guys all the time. What I feel like is happening is that as people walk our trails to get exercise and to go back to the lake to fish and walking their dogs, when they see these, they're picking them up and taking them home for pets. Okay? And we don't want to do that. We don't want to take things from the wild because it cuts down the population in the wild when you can simply go to a pet store and buy one of these if you want one for a pet. Okay? Now, I will tell you, this is one species of turtle that you can tell the gender of this turtle by simply looking at the eyes. There's a black dot right in the center of this eye. And around that black dot is a ring, and it's a goldish or a brown color. And that tells us, that is an indicator that lets us know that this is a female. In fact, I knew that. I've had her so long. She's about somewhere between 12 and 15 years old. Can live to be close to 100 years old. And you know what? I've already given her a name. Her name is Teresa. This is Teresa the turtle. Okay? Now, there are other biomes, but I want to talk about a watery or an aquatic system, ecosystem. And basically that can be broke up into 2 categories, freshwater and marine. If we're talking about freshwater, we're talking about lakes and rivers and wetlands. If we're talking about marine areas, we're talking about estuaries, coral reefs, tidal pools, a variety made up of salt water. Well, if we were talking about salt water today, specifically, I don't have an organism that comes from salt water, but I do have a replica. And you guys know what this is, right? This is a sea turtle. And we can look at this sea turtle. It has very special adaptations that will help it survive in that particular environment. It's got flippers, okay? Which allows it to be a very good swimmer, right? We also have turtles that live in freshwater. Of course, the sea turtle, he's not going to spend very much time on the land unless maybe going through the process of reproduction, okay? But freshwater turtles have a tendency to spend time sunning and bathing, okay, in the sunlight. I've got one such animal I want to show you. It's the most common aquatic turtle that we have in fresh water. It is called a red ear slider, okay? Gets its name maybe from its head. When it sticks its head out, it has red mark on each side of its head and the location where the ears of most animals are located. And then, you know, they say turtles are slow, but these guys, when they're sunning along the edge of a pond or on a log that's laying in the water, guess what? If they get startled or excited, they can move very quickly into that water to escape. It almost appears like they're sliding. So that's how they get the other part of their name, red ear slider. Now, this guy loves to eat the roots from certain aquatic plants. When I first started teaching out here, there used to be some beautiful plants around the edge of our pond. And then the population of red ear sliders just exploded. And after that population grew, those rooted aquatic plants, guess what? they disappear. So it also loves to eat fish. So that tells us this is not a true herbivore, but it is a omnivore. It loves to eat plants, and it also loves to eat small fish. So it's an omnivore. I've got one more turtle that I want to show you. And this guy, he would be considered a tertiary consumer in a pond or a lake or a river. You can find them in any one of these areas. And this is Snappy, the snapping turtle. And we can look at him and we can see that he has several adaptations. Now, the red ear didn't stick its foot out, but if its foot had come out where you could see it, you would notice that it had webbed feet. Michelangelo doesn't have webbed feet. Teresa doesn't have webbed feet. But the red ear has webbed feet, and Snappy has webbed feet. So the red ear belongs in water, and Snappy is a water turtle, okay? Now, he's a regular snapping turtle, can live to be 50 years old, weigh as much as 100 pounds, okay? Now, I estimate that this guy is probably about 25 years old. Caught him about 21 years ago, and at that time, he was a lot smaller than this, but I estimated at that time he was about maybe 3 or 4 years old. So, Snappy's pretty good. Now, he is a tertiary consumer. So, is he a herbivore? I don't think so. It would make him a carnivore. Does he have teeth? Well, let's see. Do you see any teeth? Whoa, did you see that? That's why they call him a snapping turtle, okay? So hopefully you've got an idea that different organisms thrive in different environments, which those environments make up biomes. And you know what, guys? The conditions that are in those biomes right now are threatened by human activity. And that's something to take into consideration. Now, I'm going to leave you right now, and I'm going to turn you back over to Mr. Broughton in case you have some questions you might want to ask. Okay, Mr. Broughton.
All right, thank you, Mr. Monroe. And we did get 2 questions. One was, do we have any new furry animals? And yes, we do. In fact, I'm going to see if I can flip my camera around here. There we go. And you can see our newest calf, which she's almost not a calf anymore, is Chocolate. Where's Chocolate? Anyway, there's a kind of a good look at her there. And we also are getting 2 guinea pigs tomorrow. So we do get new animals once in a while. There you can see her eat. All right, now we're going to explore Texas natives with Miss Nash.
There we are. Hello, and here's what happens to a snake after it's dead. Just find those little skeletons. Isn't that amazing? All those vertebrae, the head's gone. But you can see what's left of the vertebrae and the ribs. So we're here today in my classroom to talk about the role of plants in our ecosystem, in our biome, and compare them to other biomes. Now, it all starts with plants, as we know, in most terrestrial ecosystems. So they're the producers of their own food energy, and all the rest of us, all the animals, are consumers at one level or another. So our native plants have evolved along with the native animals. And right now, in fall, today's the equinox, by the way. So we can see those changes, those seasonal changes happening. And if we could be outside, sadly it's pouring down rain, we would see one of the amazing things that happens every year in Texas. It's the fall migration of the hummingbird. And there's a plant blooming out in the garden right now that blooms exactly now because the hummingbirds are here. It's red, they can see it, the bees can't, and it's all furled up. Nobody else can get in there to get the nectar. Only the butterfly can sit on the side and kind of stick their proboscis down in, but only the hummingbird can pollinate. So it's what we call an obligate pollinator. The hummingbird is the only animal that pollinates this plant. The hummingbird needs lots and lots of energy because they're on their way to Mexico. They're going to have to fly across the Gulf of Mexico in one day, a tiny bird. So right now they're trying to put on fat to fuel that flight. And so they stick their beak down inside to get the nectar. And when they're doing that, on the side here is the pollen. And here is the stigma where the pollen can go down to pollinate this plant. So really interesting partnership. It's a partnership. Now, we are in, if I had looked outside 200 years ago, I would not have seen all the trees that I see around. I would have seen grasses, native grasses. Because we are in what used to be part of the great North American prairie that stretched from Mexico into Canada. And the tall grass prairie would be over my head, over a man's head on a horse. The roots of these plants went down farther than the top. And that grassland was mixed in with all kinds of other plants, forbs and all kinds of other things. It wasn't just grass. There was lots of diversity, an incredible diversity. And that grassland supported the largest herd of grazing animals ever to exist on planet Earth, the North American bison herd. All that prairie, most of it is gone now. It's been turned into farmland, ranchland, etc. But that rich soil is what fueled the agricultural boom in the of wheat, corn, soybeans, etc. Now, our grasslands, like grasslands across the world, are it's a biome dominated by grass. To the east of us, we have the beginnings of the forest biome. If you go east of here, you get to the piney woods, East Texas. If you keep on going, you will go. It was originally a forest from the Atlantic Ocean to about where we are now, at the beginning of the prairie. And originally, in this part of Texas, trees were confined to river basins and creek sides, riparian habitats, where there's extra water, because trees need more water than grass. Grass is adapted to less water and also to fire. When a fire burns through the grassland, the trees may die, but the grasses just come right back from the roots. Okay? So grasses are very, very fire adapted. Trees need more water and are often less fire adapted. But we do have a lot of native trees around. Okay? And one interesting thing to notice for our native trees is if you feel the leaf, it's kind of leathery. And if you feel underneath, it's often fuzzy. Because trees that survive here have to be adapted to periodic drought. And so that leathery quality, the fuzzy quality, helps keep them from drying out as much. In other forest habitats where there's more rain, the leaves will tend to be thinner. In the rainforest, you get gigantic leaves that are not, they don't lose them ever, because it's always warm and always rains. And so they can grow these enormous, and in this case, very thin leaves, and survive. We also have temperate rainforests, okay, like on the northwest coast in Washington, Oregon, now on fire because of an exceptional drought. Okay, think about that. If you go farther north, you get what we call the boreal forests. And those forests are characterized by conifers, the cone-bearing plants, pine trees, spruces, hemlocks, etc. Our native in this part of Texas conifer is the cedar. Okay, it's our only conifer we have here. If you go farther east in Texas, you'll find the piney woods with lots of different kinds of pine trees. But the conifers are very adapted to cold and because it freezes so much, especially when it freezes, there's no water available. because the ground is frozen. Okay? So they're pretty tough, the boreal forest. Now, if you go west of here, you get to the desert. And the desert areas of our planet, the desert biomes, are characterized by lack of water, very little rain. And so plants have done some amazing things. Here in North America, we have our special plants, the cactus. They are unique to North America, or to the Americas, all the way from North America to South America. And they're amazing. They can survive with almost no water. But what happens, what they did, they don't have any leaves, okay? So this, from my knowledge, is not a leaf, it's a stem. Why did they get rid of their leaves? Well, leaves lose water. Look at that pitiful wilted thing, just from yesterday. They lose water. And so the cactus said, this is not working for me, I'm gonna get rid of them. But I've got to do photosynthesis, what to do? So they do photosynthesis in their stem. And another interesting adaptation is they open their stomata. So that's on the underside where a leaf takes in gases for CO2 for photosynthesis and gives off oxygen, but that lets them dry out really quickly. Most plants open their stomata in the day, but not the cactus. They open their stomata at night. Very clever, right? And the other really interesting thing is that in other desert regions of the world, there's often in the interior of the continent, okay, where rainfall doesn't get to, plants have figured out a similar adaptation, but they're not cactus. We call this a pencil cactus, but it's not a cactus. You'll see the little leaf here, okay? So if conditions are good, because I'm watering this one occasionally, they grow leaves. But if conditions get bad, tough, no water, the leaves fall off. But they still have this green stem to do photosynthesis. So a very similar adaptation from a different group of plants. Here's a kind of a euphorbia that demonstrates the same thing. It has leaves because I water it, but if I stop watering it, all the leaves would fall off, but the plant would not die because it still has that green stem for photosynthesis. In aquatic environments, plants don't really need roots. Sometimes they have like hold fast to hang on somewhere, but they're not absorbing the water through their roots. Okay? Because they live in the water, they don't have to do that. They absorb the water directly. Okay? This is Elodea. You might have it in your aquarium. Okay. And of course, then we have the tundra habitat or biome. Now in the tundra, there are no trees. It's just too cold. The ground is frozen solid for much of the year, and plants tend to be really short. It's so hard to survive there. And one really interesting thing that we have here that is very common in the tundra is lichen. So lichen is a symbiotic organism, algae and fungi that live together, very slow growing, very, very tough. Okay, it can grow on solid rock. This one's just growing on a branch. It's a dead branch that I pulled off. But this is what the caribou and the reindeer eat. So I want to encourage you to learn more about our native ecosystem and do what we can to help all our plants and animals survive. Thank you, and if Mr. Broughton can answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Nash. One question came from Mallory, and what human activities are affecting our ecosystems and biomes? And I'm sure you already know that human activities can negatively affect ecosystems and biomes and positively affect ecosystems and biomes. So one way humans negatively affect ecosystems and biomes is by pollution. Human activities can pollute water or air or the soil. But a positive way that humans are affecting biomes and ecosystems is, I'll email this to your teacher so she can share it with you, ranchers are partnering with the National Audubon Society to raise cattle that are bird friendly so the birds can survive on the grasslands along with the cattle. So that's one thing, that's how humans are positively affecting ecosystems and biomes. All right, now we are going to use dichotomous keys with Mrs. Fuller.
Good morning. My name is Mrs. Fuller, and we're going to talk about dichotomous keys. Now, in 1689, we had our first dichotomous key. It was a visual dichotomous key by an Englishman, and his name was Richard Waller. And he drew and painted, drew with pencil and painted with watercolor as many of the herbaceous plants of England that he could. I'm going to read you the name of his dichotomous key. Tables of the English herbs reduced as such an order as to name them by their external figures and shapes, which is much longer than dichotomous key. And that was the first one. And 100 years later, a Frenchman by the name of Jean-Baptiste Lamarck came up with a dichotomous key that was in text. And he relied on the work of Carl Linnaeus for the naming of the plants. Both of these were plant dichotomous keys. So when Linnaeus came up with the idea of naming the plants and animals, the organisms of the world, he named them with a genus and a species. So the name for dog is Canis lupus. And I've got one down here for a plant, white oak, and it's Quercus alba. Now, here in Texas, we call a dog a dog. In Mexico, they would call him perro. But all over the world, scientists would call him Canis lupus. So it's a way of having uniformity in naming. It's called binomial nomenclature, which simply means to name naming. Now let's see. The word dichotomous simply means cut in half. So when you get a dichotomous key, it's almost like a puzzle. They'll ask you a question about the organism. If the answer is yes, there's your organism. If it's no, they give you a reference to go to another place and ask you another set of questions. So it's an either or type of document. Now I'm going to show you a couple of dichotomous keys. This is a dichotomous keys for Hemiptera, which are true bugs. And it doesn't go over all the insects that we have, just the bugs, the true bugs. This is a dichotomous key. Since this is a high school course, you may have done this key in the 8th grade. And this is for all adult insects. Now, the one we're going to use today is a very short dichotomous key. We're limited on time, so we're going to work through this very quickly. This is one for Orthoptera, which is grasshoppers and crickets. So I've got a little grasshopper, and I mean, he's a little grasshopper. I'm going to show him to you. You can see him. All right, you got a good look at him. All right, let me ask the first question. The first question is, the front femora are almost as long and thick as the hind femora. Well, that's not true. Look at those hind legs. So the second question is, the hind femora are much longer and thicker than the front femora. Well, that's our guy, right? So it tells us to go to number 3 on the key. So we come down here to number 3, and it says the pronotum extends to cover the abdomen. Well, let me show you what that is. If you'll look up here, at the front part of the thorax, you see this little thing kind of looks like a saddle on him. That's the pronotum, and it's just covering the front part of his thorax. It's not coming all the way back here to cover the abdomen. So that's not our guy. So it tells us then to go to 4. So we just go to 4. This thing's just as easy as can be. Okay, so we go to 4, and 4 says, now let you look at the guy. 4 says the antennae are short, usually less than half as long as the body. The auditory organs, when present, are on the sides of the first abdominal segment. Well, that's our guy. So it says to go to 5. So we go down to 5A, and it says the antennae are longer than the front femora, which he is. I'll let you see his little head there. And wings are present. Now, this guy's not brightly colored, so it's hard to see his wings, but they're right back here, and he does have wings. So that's all it takes to find out who this is. This is a short-horned grasshopper right here. You see that? That's our guy. So it's very simple, and it's a fun way of figuring out what you found. So, and they don't just do insects and plants. They have dichotomous keys for all kinds of things: spiders, crustaceans, fossils, all kinds of things that you want to figure out what something is. Now we've got some other types of dichotomous keys here, so I'm going to show them to you. So the first one I'm going to show you, Audubon always does a really good job of helping you decide what it is that you found. This particular one is the Field Guide to North American Wildflowers. Theirs is picture-based, just like the original one from Richard Waller. What's old is new again. So you find your plant with these gorgeous photographic plates, and it tells you where to go. It gives you its name. It tells you where to go in the book. You turn back there, and it tells you all about your plant. So this is a really good way of doing it, going back to the original dichotomous key. Now we have some others here. This one's really neat. It's just a real short little, it shows you pictures, and it's called What Tree Is That? This is put out by the Arbor Day Foundation, and they do real good work. And it just starts off here at the front, showing you what different things are and what their names are. And then it tells you to go back, and you just follow the key, just like with the other one, and shows you your plant, but this is a drawing. This is not a photograph. Now, right here, we have the Pocket Guide to Trees. This one's great. It's got a wonderful botanical glossary in the front that tells you what all those botanical phrases and words are. And then it's got the key part, and you work your way through the key, and then you find your plant. This is really great because it doesn't make you wade through all the trees. It breaks it down to gymnosperms and angiosperms. It breaks it down to deciduous trees and conifers or evergreens. So this is a handy little guide. And the tree that I wanted to look up was right here, Quercus alba. I showed you his name a little earlier. There's one outside my classroom. And it shows you the leaf, it shows you the fruit, the acorn, the seed, and tells you all about it. So that's a different kind. Now, still another type, it's not photographs or drawing, it's the actual leaf and the seed or the fruit of the tree. So this is Quercus alba, the one I showed you before. And it's an actual leaf that has been pressed, so you know it's the right shape, the right size. The oak acorns vary tremendously in size and configuration, and this shows you what the acorn is for this one. And on the back, it gives you all different kinds of information. It shows you a map where it's found in the U.S. and tells you all about it. So if you are interested in finding out about plants and animals or fossils or any of a number of things, I recommend a dichotomous key to you. They're a lot of fun to use. I'm going to turn it back to Mr. Broughton, and if you have any questions about dichotomous keys, he'll be glad to answer them for you.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Fuller. There weren't any questions, so I'm just going to do a quick recap here. Share my screen with you. All right, so hopefully during this virtual field trip, you explored the relationships of biotic and abiotic factors within habitats, ecosystems, and biomes. We explored the vocabulary, different biomes of the world, Texas natives, and dichotomous keys. So thank you so much for joining us. Please give us feedback on how we did today by going to www.tiny.cc/EEC feedback. We'd love to hear what you think about this morning's field trip. We use that information to improve what we do, so you'd be helping us out by providing us with that feedback. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and wish you a great rest of your day. Have a good day.